This is the old boiler gauge glass which we removed from the boiler for doing maintenance because this boiler gauge glass is leaking. So this gauge glass is constructed in three parts. It got three layers. So before opening it, you have to mark the direction, which direction is for the steam side and which direction is for the water side. So upside will be always for steam. So we have done the marking. So once we did the marking, then we need to open the foundation bolts. So this is the bolt which is attached to the boiler. So we are opening the bolt. So always, as I say, use proper tool for opening the bolts and nuts so that you don't damage the head of the bolts. So if you use the wrong tool, either it will damage the head or you will not make use of the tool properly. You may end up in some kind of damaging the bolts or nuts. So we open both the side of the foundation clamp. So always if you are tapping with the hammer, tap it gently because it can give an impact to the boiler gauge glass and it can even damage it if there is any good one. So always whenever you are doing maintenance with the boiler gauge glass, do it softly. If you hammer very hard, it may damage your good gauge glass. So we removed it. So you can see the clamp is already loosened. We had removed the clamp. This is the structure which is attached to boiler. So next what we need to do is next we have to do the opening of all the boiler gauge glass holding nuts. So we are opening now. So we start loosening all the Uclams. This is your Uclam nuts. So whenever you loosen it, again I say use proper tool, and whichever nuts, bolts, washer you are opening when you are doing this maintenance of boiler gauge glass, keep it safely, secure it properly, because these kinds of nuts and bolts are special nuts because they are high temperature nuts. You cannot replace with a normal nut because this boiler water is always in a very high temperature. So this kind of nuts are special nuts and given by the maker. So if you want to renew it, just check with maker's spare list and you can use the spare from the OEM. So we almost opened all the connection for the gauge glass. So you can see this is your clamp, Uclam, which I am talking about. So this Uclam holds the frame glass together. This Uclam is also a bit different, special Uclam. Okay, so we opened the connection for the first set of boiler gauge glass. We open the top cover and this is your gauge glass. You can see it's a gasket. So that gasket is a soft gasket which is on the top side of your boiler gauge glass. So that is like a cushion, that acts like a cushion. And now we are opening the boiler gauge glass. Use a small screwdriver, just hit it, you will get the gauge glass out. So this is our gauge glass. You can see the corrosion mark. This is because of improper maintenance. If you do proper blow down, this corrosive material won't be there. And you can see there is one more gasket, that is your high temperature gasket, which is directly connected to the bottom side of your. You can see the corrosive material, corrosive things, all these deposits is because of improper maintenance. This boiler gauge glass should be blow down every week, so that all the chemicals which we are adding, that will be blown out. If you don't do that, this kind of deposit will be there, and later on it will keep on growing and start giving false reading. So we removed all the three sets. Now we are removing the gasket. This is your graphite gasket, high temperature gasket, which is in the bottom side of your gauge glass. So bottom side will be always your high temperature gasket, and the top side which covers with the cover will come with a cushion gasket. So if there is any vibration, that gasket will act like a cushion, and it prevents the gauge glass from getting damaged. So we removed the gauge glass, the cover, and the body is already there. So once that is done, you start preparing the gasket surface area. So do the buffing. Always do take safety measures before using the buffing material. So we removed the gauge glass, the cover, the body is already there. So we can start doing preparation for the gasket area. So gasket area should be properly buffed. Use safety goggles while using buffing machine. So do the buffing for all the connections, remove all the deposits, remove all the traces of old gaskets. You can see we have removed the old gasket area, and gasket area is absolutely free of any kind of dirts, impurities and everything. And do it for the upper cover also, because this is the area where your cushion gasket will be placed. This is your gauge glass cover, and this cover has that cushion gasket. And all the U-bolts, clamps and your bolts, nuts should be properly buffed before using back. So once you are done with your buffing area, and you can start using a very soft buffing sheet, and remove all the additional deposits. You can see there is a little cavitation in the area, but still we have the side space in a good way, so we can clean that area properly and fix the gasket. Since this boiler gauge glass is handling a very high pressure, like it is handling around 7 bar steam pressure, and it handles the high temperature water, we need to ensure the gasket area is properly buffed, properly cleaned, free of any kind of dents or any damages, so that if you put gasket, it don't get leakage. So all the three boiler gauge glass cover, gauge glass, and you can see both the gasket. One, the white color one is a soft gasket, the gray color one is a graphite gasket, and you can see the surface preparation is done properly, and it is ready for boxing back. This is your old gauge glass, and this is your new gauge glass. The old gauge glass seating surface, you can see lot of damage, and because of this damage only, we got leakage of water. So that is the reason we are going to change this. Damage maybe because of some reason, some cavitation or improper maintenance or vibration or whatever we can say. But you can see the difference of seating gasket area between the new and old. The new is absolutely clean, and you can see the old one. Okay, so again, as I said, you have to do the proper preparation for gasket seating area. So for that we are using the mild emery paper, very mild soft emery paper. Just clean it nicely, ensure there is no cavitation, nothing, no any impurities got sticked. So now we are in the process of getting ready with the gasket side. So we are done with gasket seating area cleaning preparation. So this is your soft gasket, and that will be always on the top cover of your boiler gauge glass. So this is this soft gasket. The function of this gasket is it will take any kind of thermal shocks or any kind of vibration, and it prevents the boiler gauge glass to without getting damaged. So that is the reason we have soft gasket on top, and bottom will be the graphite gasket, which is high temperature. You can see the surface is very nice. So I don't need to do more surface preparation because there is no more dent or something. So for safer side, for fixing the gasket, to avoid the gasket getting moving while tightening the clamp, I put a high temperature sealant, and I make a layer over the seating area, so that when I fix the gasket get stick in place, and it don't move from its place. So this is always used when you use the sealant, use the high temperature one when it comes for boiler gauge glass. So we evenly applied the sealant all over the surface area, seating surface. Okay, so now I can fix back the gasket. The gasket is in place. That's all. Just ensure the gasket is properly seated in correct position. Just give a check, just give a gentle press so that it gets stick along with the glue. So once the gasket is in place, next this gauge glass and the graphite gasket is already fixed. So now on top of it, follow the arrow mark which we did in the beginning, and fix the top cover nicely and ensure it is properly in place, and you can start fixing the bolts. And this U bolts are of special type. As I said earlier, this is all of high temperature forged steel, and this is given by the maker, and you cannot use a normal Uclam for this boiler gauge glass. So that is the reason I told you, whenever you dismantle any parts from the boiler gauge glass, you have to keep it secured properly. And once the gauge glass is fixed, use the clamp. So clamp with spring washer and nuts. So we have to fix for all the nuts and clamps should be fixed. So initially what you do is you check whether the glass is not moving or not. So I had kept fixed all the U clamp, and initially we have to do the tightening by hand, just hand tighten for all the clamps. So there is some procedure for tightening the nuts of your boiler gauge glass. always this boiler gauge glass will be having bowls in odd number, say 7, like 7 9, like that. So always start from the center and go forward aft, forward aft. So you have to balancely tighten the clamp. So now I start tightening from the center. So first center board should be tightened, and another main thing is you should not tighten it too much. So if you tighten it too much, then you will damage the boiler gauge glass. So I tighten the center one, and then I go for the next. Yeah, so you have to do parallelly, you have to balancely tighten the gauge glass so that your gauge glass don't get any uneven pressure on it. So if you give any uneven pressure, if you are not following the proper tightening procedure, then you will end up in damaging the gauge glass. So always follow the maker's instruction for tightening the boiler gauge glass bolts. So general procedure is always start from the center, and you have to balance both the side while tightening. You cannot tighten on one side and go for the other side. You cannot do that. Always do it parallelly, so that you are not giving too much pressure on the boiler gauge glass. You can see here I am tightening it both the side parallelly, and you have to do it very sensitively, because if you over tight any of the bolts, you will definitely damage the boiler gauge glass, because those gauge glass are also very sensitive. So yeah, I had done the tightening of initial first tightening I had done. There is no torque mentioned for this type, but again, as I said earlier, always check with the maker's instruction procedures. So the general idea is, when you tighten it, you should not tighten it too much. Do not use hammer or something, just always use hand tightening. So yeah, I had done the first tightening, and I will do the second tightening also. So once the tightening is done, that's all. This will be done for the rest other two gauge glass also. So this is how you have to do the overall of boiler gauge glass. So whenever you do the overall, ensure your gauge glass seating area is properly prepared. Your gasket is changed, both the gasket, both graphite gasket and cushion gaskets are renewed. Whenever you open, renew the gasket. Even if it is good, renew it better. And whenever you tighten it properly. Do not over tighten it, it will damage. And again, you have to use the proper tool, proper spare, because this Uclam's nuts, washers, gauge glass, gaskets are specified for boiler high pressure handling. So do not use non OEM products. Always use the maker's spare parts. Always use the maker's instruction. So I had done the second set of tightening. Okay, that's all. So I believe this video must have given you some information about how to overhaul a boiler gauge glass. Yes, we are done with the tightening. That's all. Hand tightening should be done, and once it's done, you just check, just turn the gauge glass and see whether there is any damage, visual damage, blow air. Just check visually there is whether it's properly seated, evenly seated. All this thing you can check. Okay, our job is done now.
He's our third engineer. So he's the one who described everything about the boiler gauge glass. I believe this video must have given you some information about how to overhaul boiler gauge glass. So everything you explained, right?
Yeah, actually most of the thing is 99% yeah, I explained. So beyond this limit, you can follow the instruction books as well. Better always use the manufacturer instruction book before all the gauge. That is the proper way.
Yeah, always take maker's instruction as a Bible. What we are giving is our knowledge when we are doing practically the work. So thanks for watching this video. Thank you all.